Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of Vitamin Retailer and Nutrition Industry Executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I am your host, Gene Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. The purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other related relevant topics. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, Karen Howard of Organic and Natural Health Association. Karen has served as CEO and Executive Director of this trade association since its inception in 2014. She has championed causes such as defining natural, promoting quality manufacturing, ensuring traceable sourcing, advancing regenerative farming, advocating for sustainable practices, addressing nutrient deficiencies, and propelling vitamin D research and education. Karen has also dedicated her efforts to amplifying the consumer voice and advocating for diversity within the natural products industry. Under her leadership and strategic direction, Organic and Natural Health has rapidly risen to become one of the most esteemed trade associations in the industry in less than a decade. As a visionary leader with 4 decades of experience in healthcare policy, government relations, and organizational leadership, her career has been defined by her unwavering commitment to advancing healthcare initiatives and driving change through strategic advocacy and collaboration. Karen is the author of Upset is Optional, Say Goodbye to Unnecessary Suffering. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that very kind introduction.
Absolutely. I have watched from, not really afar, but I've watched the rise of of Organic and Natural Health as an association, and I was kind of struck by the fact that it has risen very, very quickly. When you look at some of the other trade organizations that's been around for quite a while, you really have grown quite quickly. So I thought that was quite interesting. And I wanted to start, my first question may seem pretty basic, but we often think, we in the industry often think that people understand what the benefits of organic and natural are over conventional foods or conventional ingredients. I found in conversations that I've had with a number of people that that's not always the case. So what I'd like you to do, if you would, is explain your understanding of the advantages of organic and natural foods and ingredients.
Well, I think there's 2 perspectives that we can consider it from. One would be from the industry ourselves. And I think I think consumers oftentimes have a better understanding of why they are buying organic and natural than why that industry overall is
that makes
wondering
sense.
why there is a commitment to organic and natural, because ingredients are so much more expensive. And it's easier to make product without having to worry about that supply chain. But the reality is that we are the second most regulated of foods. And in my opinion, as an industry, we have an obligation to put the best products that are available out there in the marketplace. And it's gotten, over the years with technology, dirty, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And I don't think people understand the difference between making a synthetic vitamin ingredient versus using it from its natural constituency,
Right.
and what it means when you can't, and why we would need something like artificial astaxanthin, or better yet,
Yeah.
why we need an artificial CBD when that's actually grown from
Exactly. No, excellent points,
Yeah.
Karen. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, the commitment to health has to incorporate the commitment to the health of the planet, because we're really committed to being able to ensure the health of the planet for the sake of the health of people, not the other way around.
No, I appreciate that. In fact, as Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA, put in a little plug. It's kind of our focus. We derive melatonin from tomatoes and from St. John's wort. We derive vitamin D from a plant lichen, and we derive polyamines from rice germ, and so forth and so on. And it is something that I think it's very, very important, and certainly consumers love that materials are organic. Organic is better defined than natural for sure. Um,
Yes.
and that's an issue because a lot of times people think something is natural, and it's not. I mean, the vitamin D is a good example. It's like, oh, vitamin D is natural. It's from lanolin from sheep's wool. No, lanolin doesn't contain vitamin D. Lanolin is natural from sheep's wool, but you got to take it into a lab, put it through a synthetic process, and create, at the end of the day, cholecalciferol. But it's a synthetic process. So a lot of people don't know that. And to your point, like CBD, you know, there are synthetic CBDs that are out there. They're in use mostly because they're cheaper, you know,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
they're certainly not better. But yeah, so that was it's a pretty good explanation, I think, of what the value is to our industry. And I would just add that I think that as we try to differentiate ourselves in this industry, one company from another, one brand to another, one product from another, one of the ways you can do that is through the use of organic materials, through the use of natural materials. And certainly that is trending more and more. Do you find do you find that it's even more so among the younger generation, like millennials or Gen Zs are more interested in organic than, let's say, somebody in my generation, the baby boomers?
Yeah, well, being right there with you, I'm going to say absolutely. And I really think a lot of this has been driven by moms. You know,
Yeah,
it's, you know, and all of the things that people are facing with challenges with their kids and behavior disorders and all of, you know, all of the data is coming back over and over and over about it goes back to what's in the food supply chain. And you dig very deep in that, and you're going to find endocrine disruptors through all kinds of mechanics of food and ingredients. So moms have really pushed this hard. And I'm now watching what's going to happen with the new cosmetic act. So,
yeah,
you know, for the first time, we're going to try and get crap out of the cosmetics world, which is exciting beyond.
absolutely.
And I think the lessons learned from baby formula and baby food and cereals and all of the glyphosate and all the pesticides should come to the forefront. You know, I'm not in charge of that. I know how difficult it is, in fact, impossible to define natural. So I'm hopeful that they're not going to you know, go out on a limb and just say, we're just going to go figure it out from scratch because all the work has really been done.
Absolutely. We'll see what happens there. I think if the eh, we certainly aren't going to depend, at least in my opinion, on the FDA to help with any definition of that.
Not any helpful one, anyway.
No, indeed. So, um, again, we were just talking about how Organic and Natural as a trade organization has grown very quickly in a relatively short period of time. And so let me ask you, given that, the plethora of trade organizations um, in our space, in the dietary supplement space, what would you say is the value to our industry of organic and natural? What is organic and natural's value to the industry, given all the other organizations?
Yeah, and I think that's the reason that we've been able to do what we've managed to do as a small organization, intentionally created to really support the consumer by managing the quality of the supply chain from all the way, from raw ingredients all the way up through retailers and consumer organizations. So it's a very unique stratum of membership. And as a result, all along the way, people are finding value. So it could be that the retailers are learning from the ingredient companies, are learning from the contract manufacturers. That's the design of the organization. And I think that's what's really benefited us in terms of, for the sake of consumers, that's why the work is being done. And it was its origin from, like, we're going to start this thing and define natural for the sake of consumers. It was the craziest interview I've ever had in my life. It took all day long. And I said, if that's true, if that's what you really care about with consumers, I'm in. Only to learn 18 months later it wasn't doable and come out publicly and say that. So that was probably the thing that put us on the clearest, straightest path to being able to do the work that we wanted to do.
That is quite admirable, and I got to imagine quite challenging. So with regard to, I mean, how much I know some of the other trade organizations, UNPA and some of the others, have to have some interaction with Congress. Have you had to do any of that
Oh, yeah.
re-engagement with them? Yeah.
We have. So I know I mean, I started on Capitol Hill at a very young age. So I don't like to waste my time. I feel like I have purpose in life. I want to get to that purpose. And I think there are things that are worth doing and some things that are just, you have to do. And that's a fine line to walk. I believe that doing work that serves consumers will always get you further than doing work that serves a company. It may
Yeah,
take longer, and it certainly requires corporate resources. I'm not going to deny that. So
of course.
when we decided that we were going to go after vitamin D, and sent a petition into the FDA, we also did a big Hill push, and we took a nice group of people, plastered the Hill. And it's really hard to deny that increasing vitamin D levels reduces preterm birth. It's very hard to deny.
Yeah, yeah,
But the reality is that when we got to South Carolina, where the study was done, and to the South Carolina delegation, I'm just going to say it. We ran smack dab into one of the largest healthcare providers in the world, Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So between that and the March of Dimes not supporting it, we were dead in the water. We were dead in the
that,
water. And then you
yeah,
get to FDA, and that's its own story.
it is.
It's its own story, but it doesn't mean that you stop. It doesn't mean that you quit. So our latest initiative, it's funny how these things happen. It's like you wake up one day and go, oh my God, the Farm Bill's back.
Yeah, right.
5 years. And it's like, well, okay, we aren't going to be successful this time around. And it's essential that we start this work now, because 5 years goes like this. So now we're back, vitamin D again. I don't have any problem with people being able to get access through their HSAs and all of that to whatever it is they need, especially in the terms of, vitamins and minerals. But for people who are using public support systems to be able to say, I can buy my ho-hos, but I'd also like to buy vitamin D, seems like a no-brainer. So that work has begun, and that work will continue for the next 5 years in order to be able to ensure that we can get that change done. It just takes that much time.
So you mentioned earlier that you find that some of the, I guess some of the memberships or the people involved kind of learn from each other. And I was just kind of curious about what kind of educational offerings or initiatives or whatever that the organization has to help people become more aware of the importance of organic.
So we've done a lot of consumer education over the years. We started off with, here's your nutrient profile, and pictures and content, and like, this is where this comes from. So we did a lot of that in the very beginning with beautiful work. And then things got a little tricky, right? So we started getting into areas like COVID and that kind of thing. And when we dialed into vitamin D, it opened up a totally new world for us in terms of groups of people that we could organize and
I
educate.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
good.
especially around COVID, we did a huge Get on My Level campaign directed towards African Americans. I'm in a boot camp class in DC. Most of my colleagues are Black Americans. And so it's like I kind of become an evangelist on the topic. And it's work that you just have to continue. Dr. Red Cross was our spokesperson. Now we've done a whole nutrition campaign directed specifically to members of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees, using a certified nutritionist to go into their areas on local media and teach basically broadcasters why it's important to have vitamin D. So we're very targeted in terms of how we use our messaging specifically for consumer education. That will then result in congressional action when it's required.
And that kind of answers part of my next question, which was about what you hope to accomplish legislatively on Capitol Hill. But it sounds like that's part of what you're doing now, just what you described.
It is. I mean, when we took the petition into FDA to get a claim for vitamin D reducing preterm birth rates, we got a partial claim. So shockingly, we were successful in that regard. No, not as successful as I would like to be. And I would anticipate, given the work that we're doing now, that when that farm bill comes around, and it's already down to 4 years because we're already a year over. So this will not be work that ebbs. We'll just continue to do this over the next 4 years. And we're working with retailers and consumer organizations and a new alliance of groups of like-minded entities that will be much more engaged on the topic, be, more visible on the Hill, do things like, Hill days and receptions. We have a big plan for a congressional reception. So I think that's what you'll start to see over the next 24 to 36 months is where we'll be focused. It takes time, it just takes a lot of time, and you have to be patient, and Congress doesn't get much done.
No, whatever one's politics are, I think it's pretty evident. You can just look at things, and you can just look at what's going on in the news and see that they get very, very little accomplished. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's changed a lot over the years. It seems like they used to get more accomplished than they do now. I don't know. That's just my perception, but it seems like
Yeah,
there's
I would
less and
agree.
less.
I would agree. I mean, I think now everything's driven by deadlines. And I feel like people who are working in Congress now are there for different reasons than when I was working for Congress. I feel like they're not as well. I've been watching political ads because
Yeah.
I'm just a junkie. And I've watched the political ads go so significantly in a different direction that now you don't even know what party they're affiliated with. They don't even cast that. So it's about, I think it's more about passion and politics than it is about substance. The John McCains of the world. And I worked back in a day where everybody agreed to disagree on the floor, but in the
Right.
end,
And
all
that
going
was
down to the
okay.
White House for cocktails. It was a different.
Yeah, it was like my esteemed colleague, whatever, but who might think very differently than me, but you have respect for one another. Yeah, I hate to say it, but I kind of feel like the days of the John McCains are over, but I hope they're not. They seem to be, but that's how it seems. And so it makes your job more challenging, I would imagine.
It does. And we've looked at it differently. I mean, I know that a lot of my colleagues in the trade association industry do this differently, but I look at it as make friends. I'm the old Girl Scout, make new friends, but keep the old. But I think we're looking at creating relationships at the state level that will then lead to people coming into Congress. And we just did that with a congressional candidate in California who's going to take Kevin McCarthy's seat. And it's really, I think, the way to go. His parents are pharmacists, but he's new to our industry. We had him out on the floor at Expo West. It was a really good conversation. He volunteered to bring, can you believe this, state California politicians to us next year at West.
Wow.
Which, of course, California and New York are our biggest problem states. So nothing like getting on the ground early. And we raised a little money for him. And now I have a congressman I can call by first name when he gets here. So
That's
think
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just can't ignore that work. And I know there are a lot of PACs that have a policy they don't give anybody but incumbents money. I don't understand that. So
well, that's how it works.
That's how it works. That's how it works. Yeah. So in that regard, I am pathologically optimistic. I've been in this town for 40 years, but I can't help believe that it will come back, Gene. I think that this is what we have, and we're in a weird place, but it's not sustainable.
Karen, I got to tell you, I just love that term, pathologically optimistic. That is fantastic. And I love that about you. I love the fact that you maintain that optimism. But you know what I find, that especially in industry, people that have been around for a while, that are optimistic, that continue to be optimistic, are because they're the people who are very, very active in getting things done. They take the bull by the horns, and they're optimistic because they know if they put in enough hard work, they're going to be able to affect some kind of positive change. Maybe not everything that they want to accomplish, but some of what they want to accomplish. And the people that tend to be more pessimistic are the people who aren't really doing too much. I don't know if that's an accurate statement, but that's how it seems to me from the outside looking in. Anyway, so let me ask you, if you had a magic wand, what changes would you like to see made in the industry?
A couple of things come right to mind. I mean, I firmly think that we need to be reaching out past our current demographic of customers.
Mhm.
So, I mean, frankly, we've been selling to middle class white women forever
Ever,
and
yeah.
forever. And yet, even then, we're still behind, woefully behind in some ways in terms of our development of products and research for women's health issues, which is why I'm on the board of Women in Nutraceuticals, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
you
So,
and
I mean,
Heather Granato.
yes, yeah, she's on my board. So it's
Nice.
that's we're and OMN is one of the partner organizations for WIN. So that's really important. And we've done a lot of work with the African American population. We've raised over $50,000 in the industry for HBCU students and scholarships, and we've got a fund that goes towards students who are interested in health and research. So they may end up being a conventional doc, but that's our gift is to raise money for that kind of HBCU student. And we've done a lot
Nice.
of work in terms of educating minority populations on the importance of nutrient supplementation. So that to me is something that we have really been significantly negligent in. And I think it's just because it's low hanging fruit to make money from people who already have money. So
Exactly.
so to deal with large corporations and to deal with benefit packages that already cover a lot of so it's easier, right? It's easier. But I think that is one of the biggest things that I would like to see changed.
You know,
Yep.
I don't have an answer to this question. I don't know if you do, but it occurs to me. So, I was just telling you earlier, right before that we started, that, I had just been at VitaFoods in Geneva. And, one of the things that I was struck by was, we talk about diversity. It was very, very diverse there. I spoke to people from so many different countries, all parts of the world, much even more so than if I go to Supply Side West or Natural Products Expo. Um, and I saw all these different people from all these different backgrounds, and it made me wonder if the consumer groups in those countries are as represent that same diversity of the people I saw walking around the trade show. So I know, like here, you mentioned in the US, we're focused mostly on middle-aged white women in our marketing. Um, do you have any idea if it's like that in the other countries or if it's different?
I can tell you just through my 2 years of experience with WIN that if we don't get our international membership program together soon, they're going to lose it. Like the Indian population and the Indian companies, and we have a lot of people in India that work in our industry,
Sure.
they want membership in Women in Nutraceuticals. So there is a huge effort for us to figure out how best to do that. Well, we've grown so fast and so quickly. It's been an amazing thing to watch. And I keep, as the person who's the nonprofit expert on the board, I'm like, let's take a breath. Let's make sure we get it right. But I do believe you're right. I think that what's happening around the world, and we've been manufacturing in these places for decades. So what's happening around the world is really driving an enormous interest internationally, and that is not going to go away. I mean, I've seen it in
That's
New
good.
Zealand and Australia for years, but what I'm seeing in India and other places is very impressive and impactful.
Yeah, very good. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the very comprehensive answer you gave me to the question the question about the magic wand, and then also just the response to my follow-up question. So what would you say in this industry now that you're all the things that you're doing? Um, I bet you have an interesting perspective on what are the biggest threats and opportunities in the industry right now. Would you care to give your opinions and perspective on threats and opportunities?
So I will say that uh, low-hanging fruit for threats is this constant barrage of bad players in the industry that
Oh my God,
I
yes.
don't feel like we really want to tackle. I don't think we like it to look bad. Um, so that's just an ongoing problem. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of concerted effort to really tackle that.
You're right. There
Right.
isn't.
There really isn't.
That's one of my soapbox issues that I get up and I talk about a lot.
It's hard. I mean, it's, nobody, I don't really know why, except that we all have a lot to do. And I think people don't want to be diverted from their primary mission. And it just
Well,
results in ongoing problems in states, again, like California and New York.
you know,
So,
I worked for companies before that in my 45 years in this industry. And I have to tell you, there's times when I've seen some bad players doing bad things, and I've made the suggestion that we contact the FDA or contact the FTC, report them, tell them and I've had, people higher up in the company at those times say, we don't want to do that because if we do that, then, it reflects badly on the industry as a whole, et cetera, and was asked not to do that. And so I think part of that is, I don't know, that may be still one of the reasons that we don't take any action. But man, would I like to see us internally as a industry, you know, um, do something about that, because that to me is one of the worst. I've spent so much of my own life focusing on the wonderful things that the right kind of dietary supplements can do to help people. And I take it very personally when somebody starts creating products that are just crap, that are a bunch of fairy dust, that won't do anything for anybody, and make outrageous claims about them. And people think they're getting something special, they're getting something good, and it's not. And it's probably my number one pet peeve in this business, those bad actors. So yeah, I won't go on about that because I could go on about that for
well,
hours.
I mean, I think the first public education campaign I did personally out with media was about gas station supplements.
Oh my God, yeah.
Stay away from weight loss, stay away from, all of these three major categories. And I can remember back in the day before I was on the dietary supplement side, I was on the practitioner side, a long conversation about melatonin brownies on the shelves of CVS. And I'm like,
Well,
I've got a kid who just went and got one of those drinks that put him to sleep for 4 hours. I don't want melatonin brownies on the shelves of CVS.
no, I
You
I was
didn't see
always
you didn't see industry saying a word.
no, I was always amazed at the prevalence of some products, supplement products in gas stations. Certainly, you see the energy ones. When I would see the male sexual health products that would be there, I'm like, really, guys, you're gonna buy something sitting at the gas station and for your
Right.
virility? What part of your brain says that's a good idea?
Yeah, exactly.
So, what are some of the other threats you're seeing?
So what I've come to realize, since things have changed so much around COVID, I've come to realize, and I was never really one to want to play in the international arena because life is too complicated in the United States. But as times have changed and we're building new alliances with new organizations, I think we've got our heads in the sand around public health policy from an international perspective. So it's hard to do this work, right? And the international world, it's just the United States is basically ready to abdicate its authority over standards around pandemics to the World Health Organization. And that's kind of a really weird approach, given that they're not elected or represent anyone, and their expertise is whatever it is, versus us having, as an independent nation and leader of the free world, our own ability to make those decisions. So I think this international conversation needs a lot more light shown on it and a lot more interest. And I don't see it getting much press. I don't see the trade associations talking about it. I don't see it on agendas for industry meetings. And I think we're going to wake up one of these days and discover that we don't have any input into what some really core public health issues are.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things that, besides the bad players, that always drives me just a little bit crazy, and I wonder if it hits you too, is reports that you get about supplements in the media. I'm not talking our industry media, but conventional media. Do you find that to be challenging as well?
I find that to be challenging, it always has been, and now add to that what's happening on social media.
Oh
So
my God.
if I could
Oh,
wave this magic wand, and I've actually been dabbling in it, I'd create an AI component that would let me go out there and see all of the bad information that's out there, and then
oh,
be able to transparently send back information saying, "This is crap. You're being fed, really."
absolutely. I literally wrote an article that I posted on LinkedIn a couple months back where we won't talk about a brand, but I talked about a ad I had seen for a certain mushroom coffee product that came up on social media, and it said, "No more inflammation. You take this." Literally, that was their tagline, "No more inflammation." And besides the inaccuracy of that statement is astounding, and besides the fact that they didn't have enough of any of the mushrooms they claim to have in there to actually have an effect on inflammation. Um, but just the irresponsibility of making such a statement. And I see those things happening all the time. It pops up on Facebook, it pops up on Twitter, it pops up everywhere. It's like, stop, you're lying. People believe you. You just don't care. Because back, I guess, to the bad actors again, but it's our media that's allowing these things to come through.
Well, and then
Uh,
now it's out of our control. I mean, once it hits TikTok, this is the reason I'll go on.
yeah,
I mean, I would never be on TikTok. My daughter thinks it's a travesty I'm on TikTok. But the
yeah,
reality is because there are so many people spewing bad information on TikTok, I'm willing to go out and say, here's how you need to listen to this. Here's, what you need to hear. And I just think we have to meet people where they are.
indeed. Uh, yeah, so that's another one of the areas. What are your thoughts about uh, synthetic biology and in regard to transparency? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I don't know if you've been on a plane lately, but yes, you have because
Yes,
you're
I
here.
have.
So if you look at your snack packs on the planes, you'll see bioengineered on almost all of them. And when that law was passed and the rule was issued back several years ago now, we lost the battle. Bioengineered is a language. And the only reason they have to put that language on there is because they can detect DNA from GMO crops. And that's
Yeah,
what
sure.
requires that label. That's the transparency rule. So this new SynBio world that we have really taken the lead on in terms of the industry doesn't have any of that transparency at all. And we have worked diligently for the past couple of years to be able to find that DNA. And we've gotten so close that perfect day after the presentation that we had at Supply Side West, we had to go back and change claims on their website.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But this is dangerous because what I have seen, even in our own world, is people who are committed to being healthy stewards, don't want to eat meat and dairy, have been sold this bill of goods about this is good for the environment and don't understand that it's actually being created from genetically modified crops, which are killing the soil. So it's that lack of transparency that kind of keeps me up at night and willing to stick this conversation out. And it's one that we kind of fight alone. So I don't know what our odds are at the end of the day, but we're really deep into it. And it's bad. It was just bad. Whether it ends up being unhealthy for people or not is beyond my pay grade and my intellectual level. But I do know for a fact it's super bad for the world. And
Yeah,
I
environmental issues, the ecology, the locals' ecology, and what the impact is on that of these GMO crops are very concerning to me.
Yeah, extremely concerning. And so we're just continuing. We're just beating at it and beating at it. And with John Fagan's expertise with HRI Labs, I think we'll get there probably faster than people will think that we can get there. That's the goal.
So, Karen, now that we've talked a little bit about some of the threats, what do you think are some of the opportunities in the industry?
I mean, I think we've barely begun to touch the surface in terms of what we can do to help people. I really do. I mean, this is when we've come through a pandemic and we've seen what it takes to stay healthy. Um, if we can make that stick and people can understand that supplementation along with a healthy diet, lifestyle, and a lot of exercise will like stem this away, that you don't have to suffer as a child with asthma, allergies. I think there's enormous work left to do there, an opportunity in terms of educating specific populations, and really spreading health in a really effective way.
You talked, we said educating them, and I think that's the key. One of the things I find a lot in supplement companies, even good actors, they're like, well, we don't, that's an interesting concept, but we don't want to have to spend time educating people about it. Yeah, but if you don't educate them, then somebody has to, and if not us, who?
Right. Right. And that's what, we operate organic and natural health with no staff. I'm a contractor. So it's me, it's pitch publicity, and it's Syncopate who does our meetings. It's 3 women. And that means that we can pour our money into the projects that we really want to do, that are almost all our funds go to consumer education. That's really our number one priority.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And as soon as you get a footing and you think you've got it figured out, my consumers will go south on me. This happens to me with my boot campers, and they'll go, "Oh, you can get enough vitamin D from the sun." I'm like, well, wait, come back.
Yeah, if that were true, I mean, we're not an agrarian society anymore. People aren't getting sufficient sun. We have the data. We see that people are having vitamin D insufficiency, vitamin D deficiency. That it's kind of like, if you just eat a good diet, you don't need to take supplements. Oh, that's great. What percentage, according to the USDA, 10% of Americans are eating a good diet? Please, we can't deal with pie in the sky. We have to deal with what the reality of the situation is. And certainly people are not getting enough vitamin D, and spending time in the sun isn't. And then the ones that do, they slather up with sun blocker to cover themselves, which means they don't get the conversion anyway. Anyway, I off on a tangent, but yes.
You're speaking my language.
Yeah, indeed.
I wouldn't do this work, Gene. I would not do any of this. I wouldn't do ONN if it wasn't for that consumer education component of it. That's the only reason that I'm doing it, because as long as I can educate consumers on the quality of what my members do, I'm a happy human being. Well,
very good. I admire, what your organization's doing, and you in particular. I think that's very important. Which, if I can bring back my magic wand questions, I have one more magic wand question for you. If you could change one policy, just one, to benefit the industry, what would that be?
So I told you, I've been at this for a really long time, and I've worked on healthcare issues since, I don't know, 1983.
Yeah.
And the one thing that will continue to confound us until we figure out how to change it is the Congressional Budget Office. It's really nerdy, but the reality is that the Congressional Budget Office cannot score savings from health-related reductions in costs. So I go for a physical, and that's a cost. It's never attributed to a savings. I see a chiropractor, which keeps me going to class and doing, tossing weights around, and that's an expense. There's no way to value savings from health. It's all an expenditure, which feeds the insurance industry. And that at its core is defining public health policy, because it's all cost and no savings.
Yeah.
I don't know how
to. Great deal of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've learned a lot about your association and you. I didn't quite realize as much about your background. That's fascinating what your background is, and that you've been able to apply it to such an important and meaningful project in the Organic and Natural Association. So I thank you for the work you're doing. And I would just like to ask, before we finish up, is there any kind of parting message that you'd like to leave here for our industry, since this is a pretty industry specific podcast?
Well, I guess what I would remind people is that you're an ambassador. Like, yes, you own a company, you have employees, you have an obligation to your customers, but the reality is that you are a health ambassador in this world. And that every time you step out and people ask you what you're doing, you have an obligation and a privilege to be able to help them figure out new pathways to being healthy. And that should be everyone's number one priority. And from that, wealth will be attained. There will be no shortage in sales ever. But I think that that's really the most important part, that we can never forget, that this is really all about the people that we serve.
Thank you for that, Karen. Well, and thank you for being a guest on the podcast. And I just want to remind the listeners, if you like what you've heard, what you've seen, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Thanks again, Karen.
Thank you.